about dealing with insults or annoying people, or just in general how to not be offended by what others are doing or what they're saying to you, no matter what, how insulting, how much they're insulting you. How do you become bulletproof in that sense?
Well, that is another thing that has to be rooted in restraint beforehand. Basically, because you get offended by people, by insults, because your mind has no control over itself. So then immediately it jumps at the worst scenario, or jumps at the insult and starts not wanting it, resisting it, refusing it, want to retaliate because of it. But if you were able to keep your mind in check, then the insult would just come and go and you wouldn't be affected by it. But you can't expect to be able to keep your mind in check if your body hasn't been kept in check and your speech hasn't been kept in check. So that's why it's a hard thing to do in a way, because people are generally impatient. So they have a problem, they want to fix, but you tell them, well, in order to fix it, you need to start building this basis for it, for the fix, for the solution. Because if you're a well-restrained person in regard to your own desires that usually move people left and right, if you have confidence, confidence comes from the restraint, from being able to say no to yourself, then yeah, you wouldn't lose perspective even when others or basically abuse you verbally or even physically. Like the mind would not feel beaten because of it, because it's basically the mind gives in. The mind makes itself insulted and affected by it, because the words, I mean, the physical actions they stop with your body. The words, they stop at a level of speech, but then it's the mind who picks it up, resists it, doesn't want it, hates it, gives in to your will on account of it, or similar. Yeah, don't let him wrong.
So if someone calls you an idiot, so your views are ridiculous,
Well,
the
if
only
you
reason you're going to get offended.
No, you get offended if you were not clear about your own views beforehand. If you were holding on to them for various unwholesome reasons, such as a sense of identity, or because you fancy yourself as an intelligent person, smart person, intellectual person, or just general insecure, and then you kind of find solace in conviction and faith, and then if somebody challenges that, you did like struck right in your core. But if your views are the product of restraint and wisdom, yeah, nobody can challenge it. I mean, the whole world can disagree with it. Like, you wouldn't be able to be affected by it because there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's not based on unwholesome, it doesn't harm anyone, and it frees you from suffering right there and now. Sorry, right here and now. In the sense of that you have a direct verification that you're not pulled and controlled by your own desires anymore, as much as you used to be. Which means there's already that sense of confidence. Oh yeah, no, this works. No, people can come and tell you, no, that doesn't work. That's ridiculous. That's just nonsense. It won't make a difference to you because actually you've seen it work. So you would the only conclusion would be, they don't know what they're talking about. Because if they were to know, they would agree with this. It's universally right. Freedom from desire, in that sense, means freedom. So if you have that kind of clarity internally, then insults, won't be able to insult you. Like if somebody says something in ill will, his ill will or hers ill will wouldn't necessarily cause your ill will, and then you wouldn't, because you're not full of ill will, you wouldn't lose your own perspective, which means you would be able actually to hear what they're saying, even if it's a complete ridiculous nonsense insult. You would still be able to hear it because you're not immediately automatically on a defensive. And then sometimes you would hear, actually, he has a point there. I mean, he's completely wrong because he's full of ill will and coming from a wrong place, but that's not my problem. But the content of what he was saying, yeah, I should have known better, or I made a mistake. And that's it. You wouldn't be able to take it personally. You wouldn't be able to, Jabu, come here. You wouldn't be able to take it personal. And that's the problem. People cannot help but take this, well, people's mind cannot help but take whatever comes their way personally, and then immediately end up either rejoicing in praise or defending against the blame, and attacking and fearing blame as well. Even if it's completely groundless and ridiculous, they'll still fear just the phenomenon of blame aimed at them. Doesn't matter by whom, what for, if it's complete, like if it's just utter fabrication, there's no basis of truth. Doesn't matter, they'll still try to avoid blame for the sake of it, because they fear it, because they don't have that clarity and transparency and control over their own mind to not be able to jump in it in that irrational manner.
What about things like annoy, like I suppose like the weather or insects?
Well, again, it's the same similar attitude, just slightly more subtle. Can you pull the curtain, please? My curtain fills with mosquitoes. The annoyance, again, it is a form of you resisting things that are not really in your control. Like you gave the example of the weather. Like, why are you annoyed? Because you have desires that require a good weather. And while those desires are present, the bad weather is causing that discrepancy that's making you annoyed. You want to get rid of it. But can you get rid of the bad weather? You can't. So that's why it's important to recognize that that discrepancy is causing you to suffer. If it is, then you will recognize that the way that you can remove that suffering is remove the discrepancy. So if you can't change the weather, you can't change external circumstances in the nature, which means what you can change is change what you want at the time, change your desire. If you remove the desire that was requiring a nice sunny day, you wouldn't be affected by it, by no amount of rain or any other bad weather. It just wouldn't affect you. If you had a desire to just stay in and not go anywhere, it doesn't matter if it rains. So if you're annoyed, there's got to be a reason. And that reason is that basically what makes that discrepancy. So you can either continue blaming the circumstances, blame the weather, blame the world, blame the other people, or recognize that that is inevitable and that's not where that suffering is rooted, nor that discrepancy. It's rooted in things that you can say no to, which is your own desire. But people take that for granted, so they never want to say no to their own desire, which is why it's always someone else's fault whenever suffering arises. It's because of this or because of that. It's never because, I crave and I cause discrepancy with my desires, and as a result of that discrepancy I suffer.
Once again, desire once again, craving once again.
Yeah, there is no other cause of suffering, like that, as if craving is sometimes suffering or something. No, whenever there is suffering, it's because the discrepancy caused by craving, nothing else. Not like more or less or a bit later. No, to the extent that there is a discrepancy, to that extent there is suffering, and that discrepancy is what craving is. Either trying to prolong that which doesn't last as long, trying to get rid of that which lasts too long.
Because there's certain techniques that some people might do, like if someone's someone who's an insulting person who's got a lot of ill will towards you.
Right.
Then when you see them, you sort of think that they're only human, they make their own mistakes.
Yeah. No, all of those things are management of the problem. None of them, management cannot uproot the problem. It can only manage it, which means it requires it. So, yes, in the beginning when there is absolutely, you don't really, like confusion, you don't know what to do. So then, management can offer some sort of help. But it's a mistake to regard management as a way of practicing towards uprooting the problem altogether so it won't arise ever again. Because management just covers up, just deals with it. Which means when the next one comes, you have to manage. Which means that's not freedom. when you need to do something, whenever this occurs, I need to go through these motions, I need to do it. Sooner or later it's going to get too much. That's the definition of a burden, duty. So you want to aim at the development of mind or meditation and practice whereby you don't have to do anything on account of suffering except see it. And you cannot not see it if you're just mindful. You always see it because you're mindful. And suffering is something that universally you cannot be oblivious to. Which means all you have to do is remain mindful and see the suffering, and then the suffering will cease. I mean, if you're doing things rightly, then seeing suffering means uprooting the suffering, because you understood it. But management of suffering does not mean uprooting of suffering. So management of annoyance does not make you impenetrable to future annoyance, and you know that. You might become very skilled manager and be able to deal with these things very quickly, but still you need to deal with it, which means you're affected in the first place. And freedom from it is when you're not affected even in the first place. So that's the difference when it comes to freeing yourself from suffering. Don't confuse management of it as the way out of it ultimately. It's not. The way out of it is understanding the nature of it, whereby having suffering arisen means you're free from it. Or simply put, having suffering arisen means it can't touch you anymore. Arising of suffering just reminds you that you're free of suffering, which means it's not your problem, which means it's not your suffering, which means there is no suffering anymore.